let's go ahead and begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another ICG webinar. I'm Eric, and I'll be your host and moderator this morning in what should be a very informative presentation on the issue du jour, which is AI, or artificial intelligence. Before we hand things off to our guests, I was reflecting on this topic the other day. Yes, I was reflecting on AI. And one of the things I thought about was AI as a term is that ever since ChatGPT was launched in November of 2022, users have been amazed at the growth and potential of this technology, even though it's been around and evolving for several years. We're familiar with products we use daily like Google Maps, digital assistants, and my best friend Alexa, but we probably did not refer to them as AI. And I think most tech novices, and I'm certainly one of those, were unaware of how robust this technology is and how it can make our work measurably more efficient. But what is clear is the technology is here. It's getting better each day, and both the public and private sectors are looking to these systems to make their organizations more responsive and more efficient. And to help us understand this information better, we're joined by Parth Shah. He is CEO and co-founder of Polimorphic, which is a leader in AI tools and workflow automation for local government. Parth is an MIT engineer and ran the MIT machine intelligence community. Before Polymorphic, he worked at NVIDIA working on machine learning and was a founding engineer at a startup building data analytic tools to power smart cities. By the way, NVIDIA was on 60 Minutes last Sunday, and it was just fascinating stuff. So Parth, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. If attendees have questions, just post them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to them after the presentation. So Parth, thank you for coming on, and I'll turn it over to you.
Amazing. Well, thank you for having me and the kind introduction, Eric. Where I wanted to start, and I know there's been, a lot of conversation around AI, and it almost feels like there's this fatigue about discussing it. But it is very interesting to think about how we could actually apply it to the work we do in local government. And I think one thing that's been coming up, and I guess to start before even diving into AI, is to really remember how much, what really stands out to us as county officials. There's no doubt that y'all work hard for constituents, but what's fascinating to note, and then we were looking at a few kind of studies on this, and I put 4 headlines, but you can kind of see this theme, which is opinions and experiences and views of local government have been primarily driven by negative experiences over the positive ones folks have, right? No one's ever remembering all the times that the roads got fixed or they got their permit issued. They think about all these kind of negative experiences, which is unfortunate, but what it does make you think about is how can we reduce those negative experiences and provide even more delightful positive ones. And to what Eric was just saying around the private sector really leveraging AI, I think one thing we hear a lot is in local government, we don't really have competitors the same way in the private sector they exist. But it's worth noting, which is the competitor is now the experience, right? People are used to ordering pizza on Domino's and seeing this amazing, status tracker. People are used to being able to go to any website and chat GPT and getting answers to questions they have immediately. And so that is really what we end up competing against. And that's where these negative experiences often happen, which is there's this expectation of every other part of my life, every other service I interact with, I expect and have gotten used to a certain level of quality. And it feels like with county government, what's even more challenging right now is we have less and less staff resources to help meet those demands. And so this is where AI in particular has been really interesting. And as Eric kind of mentioned, we started with really a focus on CRM and workflow management, which had not too much to do with AI, but really trying to help that customer service side. And what we quickly realized is with these macro trends that are going on, there's this huge opportunity for AI. So with that, I kind of wanted to frame it as what we're really going to be talking about today is, how can we provide our constituents a really amazing experience? Like we want folks to leave an interaction with their county government and saying, this was better than my experience with Apple or even like another consumer company? How do we get to that quality experience? And I think there's a few root causes that are leading to this, leading this to be challenging. So on one side, there's different rules of record keeping among departments. You have these silos popping up. I think the big one we're seeing is staff is overworked. There's all these things we need to do. They're spending time on the phones answering questions. There's so many emails that are coming in, which makes it difficult because the scope of responsibilities has increased, but the tools to make that possible are still difficult. And finally, constituents get frustrated because they can't find answers to simple questions. And so, not that there's anything wrong with picking up the phone and calling, but it seems like for every simple question, we were talking with the State Department in Nevada, and they said they had to shut down the phone lines on Friday just because they couldn't get any work done because there were so many phone calls, right? And this is what happens when those services are hard for constituents to find. It also costs you and your staff's time to be able to get around to the stuff that they really want to be doing. So yeah, quick background, as Eric kind of mentioned, I've spent a lot of my life around AI and machine learning, and then the other part of my life around local government. So I obviously started at a company that was doing a lot of stuff in AI with NVIDIA, and then I also ran the machine intelligence community, and then also spent some time in the smart cities world. A little bit more about the company, more than me. We were actually the first to launch a generative AI search in the country, and it was actually with the city of Grand Rapids and a small town in New Jersey called Prospect Park. And since then, in the last few months, we have over 50 governments live, around 50 governments live, and many launching soon. So we've done this, we've seen it before, and we're going to show a few examples of how they're really seeing ROI from what generative AI can do. So I want to start with, the piece of everyone's thinking about, right? AI is new, and I think there's rightfully so some fear around it too. And so I wanted to collect some quotes on what people are saying about AI. So here's a few I got. So the first one says, there's no reason an individual would ever want in their home. This one was, I think, kind of interesting. It can't take the place of a common teacher, and it can't change the way government works. And the third one was, it will go spectacularly supernova and then catastrophically collapse. So this is like a mindset we hear a lot with fear and all these things around AI. However, I think it's surprising if I told you these quotes aren't actually about AI. They were actually about the internet. And this was by a variety of folks through, as early as 1977 to 1995, which is fascinating because now we rely extensively on the internet, right? The website is in many ways our portal to how our residents, our businesses can find out about the services we offer as a county. So I find that an interesting example, which is all those fears about the internet. I'm not saying they're incorrect, but it's still a very useful tool and one that we rely on extensively, right? We spend a ton of money on our websites. I think we spend even more in terms of the staffing costs we use to keep it up to date. We have our intranet, things like that. So I just gave an example here of for a mid-sized county and some of those line items that get involved. And, I did it conservatively, but, you're talking about most places are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of staff's time keeping their website up to date. You obviously have your website costs. So clearly it's a very important investment as a county. And even then, I think one of the challenges that we keep seeing is with all that time, all that money that's being spent, constituents and staff are still having trouble finding things, right? And so what happens? They usually call in to get their questions answered when they can't find an answer on the site. So that's an expensive and time-consuming interaction for staff. Specific questions for your staff even require hours digging through codes and ordinances, right? We have extensively complicated, forget just the departments. There are so many different kind of rules and regulations. They're split and fractured across many different sources. So it's really hard to find that. And now there's this kind of interest, and I'm sure y'all have kind of run into some chatbots, and they try to help, but they're not really effective when you face them with kind of typos or synonyms because they're very rule-based, right? You had to program every response in. So it's like, if they ask about this, then answer this. If they ask about this, answer this. Once again, very time-consuming for staff, not really a great experience for your constituents, right? They're not used to this in other industries. So I want to show kind of really simple, low-hanging fruit opportunity on AI. And before we dive in, I want to start with what AI is, right? And so there's a lot of things thrown around. Some people have this Terminator idea or this other version, which is hey, it's been in your email forever. But really simply, like what AI is it's a computing system, right? It's a computing system that can do complex tasks now, that historically only humans can do. And specifically, this term GPT we hear, which is generally pre-trained models, is basically AI that's been trained on the whole internet and a lot of language. So it gets a really deep understanding of, if I ask you a question, it can give me an answer, right? Um, so obviously everyone knows ChatGPT, but GPTs are a general concept, right? They can be used by your county, and I think the big thing that we're really pushing is ChatGPT is on the whole internet, right? Could we get a GPT that just works for your county, right? We had this story where we were talking to one of the folks we work with is Roanoke, Virginia, and what they always joked is there's also a Roanoke, Texas, right? And so on ChatGPT, if they were to ask questions or constituents ask questions about Roanoke, it would sometimes pull sources from Roanoke, Texas. And so there's this idea, which is how do you build a walled garden? Take that knowledge that GPT has, that kind of general knowledge of language, and then apply it to the specific content or the specific data, um, to make sure that it's accurate, and it doesn't, make up false information. And so we're going to show, I'm going to show a few examples of counties that use it. But there's kind of three problems we've seen it solve, right? The first one is with generative AI, you can make your website easier to search and find answers on, right? Which saves a ton of phone calls. The cost savings there are massive. The second one is, and this one surprised us, communications departments can actually start using it to make sure the website is up to date. And I'll share a story there when we get to the demo. But there's a really interesting example where one of the cities we worked with and one of the counties we worked with were able to update a ton of pages they didn't realize were out of date, that residents were looking at, everyone was looking at. They just didn't realize they hadn't updated those pages in a while. And then finally, what we're working on too is even for staff, right? Internally, we have an intranet with our sources, things we want to ask questions about. Simple examples are sometimes staff want to just know what benefits are, like travel policies, things like that. And that is right now split up amongst your intranet and emails and all of that. So you can actually organize it into a system here. So I'm going to show a few really quick examples. This is one of the first counties that launched it. It's Rowan County in North Carolina, about a mid-sized county there, 160,000 residents. And the story there really, the big struggle they had was their Department of Social Services has been inundated with phone calls. And they haven't been able to hire their front desk staff. It's been, one of these positions is very tough. There's a 1-year tenure, 3 years of training. The turnovers happen all the time. And their assistant county manager kind of pointed this out to me, which was all the questions we get, 50% of them are on the website, or they're common questions. They're standard questions and answers we should be able to provide. The problem is, if you're a resident, you don't know the nuances between all the departments and within each department, which division handles what, right? They think of it all as this is the county, right? So that makes it really difficult. And this is how most websites are structured, right? Where you have different departments, different pages within that, different subpages within that. When a constituent can't find their answer quickly, and that means obviously within the first 30 seconds of checking the website, what they're going to do is pick up the phone and call, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that means now staff is spending 5 to 10 minutes trying to explain something that's already on the site. And this is exactly the problem Rowan County is going through. And I don't think it's unique from what, most, we're about to announce a few projects, obviously in Florida soon with counties, same story, right? So it's not a unique story at all. And so where we started was, can we harness this power of these GPTs, but build one specifically for Rowan County? And so that's what you have right here. It's front and center. It's the first thing you see on their website because it's so valuable. It's handling about 700 questions and answers a week. So it's getting 100 residents an answer back a day, which is, really exciting. The time savings are on the order of hours and hours a day for staff. So you talk about kind of ROI, it's pretty impressive. So I'm gonna ask a simple question here, like how do I adopt an animal from the shelter? And you're gonna notice right here that just like a keyword search, it has your sources, but it's also gonna provide you a really neat answer. It's very clear. It's based on only content from Rowan County sites. That's that walled garden piece we're talking about. So when we talk about AI, I understand a concern is, how do we control it? How do we make sure we're judicious about it? we have put in a lot of effort to make sure it stays within this walled garden. And, we make it really easy for counties to set this up. So you can see how it answered that question, provided answers, laid it out really simply in the step-by-steps, and then has that link you can click through right there. I can ask a more complicated question, and I like this example because the event center answer is actually based on multiple pages on the website, right? So they have a facilities page, but then they also have the West End Plaza, which is the actual event center that you can use. And that's another benefit, which is instead of having constituents having to check 3-4 different pages and figure out, and they had to synthesize it all together, which is like on the facilities page, it tells you the policy for renting, and the West End Plaza is the actual plaza I can, use. What do? They end up calling, right? The AI is smart enough to synthesize it too. So it knows that you can use it, and then here's where you can find information, but the amenities and information is based on that facilities page. So I think that's a really exciting example I like to show. It's simple, but it shows how much better that is than a keyword search or something like that. So those are kind of two simple examples. I want to show one that's a little bit more complicated, and this is one of my probably favorite examples. So in Polk County, they always joke we have the most complicated rules around fences, which I think every county is kind of vying for that position there. And so one of the famous questions I like to ask here is, what are the rules around fences? But I'm going to ask a really specific version of this. Your solar generating facilities. We're going to see this answer. It's going to lay it out in the bullet points. It's going to put out a pretty clear answer here, right? Where it says it has to be completely enclosed within 200 feet. Lays out in pretty plain language. I think what makes this impressive, though, is if we're going to look at the source it pulled from, it's actually their zoning ordinance. And this is, nearly 100 pages of just extremely legal definitions, very complicated. So the funny thing is, when we showed this example to the county staff, at first, we were like, well, this is exciting for your constituents, right? Your residents and business can get answers. What surprised us was they actually were shocked, as it was actually something they're now using to onboard staff faster and use a staff tool. Because for staff, navigating all the complex ordinances and different rules and regulations is difficult, right? When you think about a new staffer who joins, I mentioned earlier, like your front desk staff, it's often 3 months of training in most 311 operations, because there's just such a large volume of content out there. And so what you can also use this for is not just on the website, but also as a call assist tool, where staff can actually use it internally, ask questions they're receiving on the phone, have some context, have those links directly popped up to them at the top, and then use that to really provide an answer faster, more accurately, reduces your training time, improves retention, all those things. So that's kind of the basics there. I'm going to jump into now another part, which is more quotes about AI. And as y'all probably caught on to this theme, these are probably not about AI, but this one, 2 quotes here. Too many shortcomings to be seriously considered. It's an amazing invention, but who would ever want to use it? What they're actually talking about was phones. So this was William Morton in 1876, and then also, President Hayes, 1876, talking about phones. At the time, people didn't really think it'd be very useful. Now we all know it is absolutely something we rely on. It is probably the primary way most constituents interact with their local governments. And we actually did some calculations, and this is based on some of the data we've collected from counties we work with already. So some general estimates, around 55% of local government budget goes towards staffing costs. And what we found is that from our partner counties, about 10% of aggregate staff time is spent on the phone. We were running some numbers on this, and it was absolutely shocking to think about that. So you're talking about around 5% of the budget there is kind of handled there, and about 1 in 2 of those calls, we work with the county to kind of develop transcripts around this, were actually questions that were repeat questions. So there are some that need follow-up, are more complicated, but about 1 in 2 calls are just questions that can actually be answered on the website. That AI search we're looking at does a great job already of answering. But they're still calling in about those. And so this kind of took us to the next level with search. So search is kind of our introductory experience. Search and the chatbot, they're great. Go on the website, fantastic. But what it's actually building towards is a general knowledge base, a general question and answering system for all services you offer at the county. And so the alternative to kind of the model, and we're used to this, like most counties we've seen before using our voice AI system, I'll talk about it. It's like, you got your automated attendant, right? So you call in, it's like press 1 for animal services, press 2 for this department, press 3 for this department. You get to 9 and it's like press 9 for more departments, and you go through it again, right? It's this experience which is constituents had to figure out where they need to go. As we established earlier, they don't really know which departments handle what 80% of the time. The second one is after hours. So we work with a surrogate court in Passaic County, New Jersey, which is about 500,000 residents. And they handle wills. And as you can imagine, that's kind of a challenging thing for them to handle because they're a surrogate who heads the office says, you can't plan death, right? So we get calls at 5 p.m., 7 p.m., 1 a.m., 4 a.m., and we're not at the phones. There's no way they can get an answer. And sometimes it's as simple as like, when is the surrogate court open? Like, what are the fees for the probate of a will? And they just leave it to voicemail. And so one of the things that got them really excited was actually just setting it up as an after hours line where you could still leave a voicemail if you want, but this phone AI actually, just like the AI search, but actually sounds like a person, will answer questions constituents call in with. And it's such a huge advantage because you really can offer 24/7 customer service, right? That is something like you talk about a delightful experience for your residents. You could say that anytime you call our county, we will get you an answer. And so the tagline that was given to us by some of the counties we work with is, they said, we're never going to leave someone on hold, which I thought was a really compelling opportunity for constituents. But it's not just for your residents and businesses. There's also a lot of value for your staff, right? So we talked about right now, it's harder to hire than ever. I talked about kind of that front desk role. We've seen across the board the tenure for that, for folks who are in that 311 or, basically your call center. It's a 1-year tenure and 3 months of that are spent onboarding. The folks who do well, we want to promote them into other departments. Other folks end up leaving because you're spending your time on the phone day after day, handling often, the same questions over and over. It's not an easy job to be in for a long amount of time. And so that's one of the big ROIs, which is if you can handle 50% of those repeat calls, so your staff can actually focus on those more complex questions that are coming in, the cost savings are huge. Your residents are happier and your staff is happier too. You're going to increase your retention. It's going to make recruiting a ton easier. And you talk about phone calls as a cost center. I mean, we just established a significant portion of your budget is just spent handling phone calls. So if you can kind of simplify that, you can now reallocate those resources for the things you actually want to do. And then other things that we just kind of do behind the scenes is we automatically log it into a CRM. So make sure those tickets are being resolved. So your customer service experience, you're not letting anything fall through the cracks. And we talked about that automated agent, which is it's actually smart enough to know where to route it. So if it can't answer your question because it knows the content of your question, it'll actually route it to the right department. So you now have this amazing experience with a constituent where I call in and I just say, how can I help you? Ask the question. And if I can help you, I'm going to answer you right there. If it needs to be routed to one of the departments or staff members, I don't need to go through a phone tree to do that. It's actually going to route me and save me the trouble of having some staff act as like a gatekeeper or where to reroute calls to. So that's a really exciting piece. So how does this all come together, right? So we talked about kind of voice and search, and then I mentioned how all kind of gets talking about CRM and this, what does all this have to do with each other? And this is kind of what we're explaining, and this is the future, I think, for most counties is going to be, there's been a lot of investment into ERP systems, right? And you talk about that as like your back office. So an ERP is like your finance, your accounting, all of that. What exists in the private sector, in some senses, it's going to look different in government, but it's happening right now with counties. And the successful counties we're seeing are setting this up is what I call as a constituent experience platform, which is your front office. So how do questions get handled? How do we make sure that we get back to our constituents when they have a request? How are we managing those? And so part one of that is handling the how do I, right? The how do I. It's like, what service do I need? Or do I need a permit to, build a deck on my house? Where can I pay my property taxes? That leads to the staff being inundated with those simple questions. And that's where our GovGPT comes in, right? So it works on the phone, as I mentioned. It works on your website. There's a chatbot version. There's one that can actually work on text. We're about to roll one out on email. So basically, any of the mediums they can reach out to, they're getting answers fast and 24/7. And your staff is reclaiming massive, massive amounts of time to focus on the work they actually want to do. So beyond just the ROI there, you're also improving retention, things like that. So really want to emphasize, like, it's more than just a chatbot. We're hearing a ton about chatbots, and those are great. Chatbot's part of it, right? This is pulling in your website, your documents, your code, other sites, and it can be used by not just your community, but also by your staff. And it can be used through that chatbot, the search feature, and then the phone, which I think is, obviously the most valuable in terms of the ROI to most counties we work with. Part two. So we went from how do I to then I want to, right? So now I got my answer, but now I want to pull it off, right? So I want to apply for a permit. I want to build a deck on my house. I want to pay my property taxes. How do you actually make sure and handle those tickets? And so that's where we come into what sits under our AI, right? So we don't just stop at answering the question. We want to make sure that those questions, if there's follow-ups, the whole life cycle of the request is handled. So we offer an online way for the community to submit and track requests. Staff can have an internal system to easily track and manage it. And then for y'all on kind of the elected and leadership side, there's data now, which is like, how many calls are we handling? What are people asking about? How many requests are we fulfilling? How quickly are we fulfilling them? So that's really what a constituent service platform looks like at the end of the day, right? Which is we're using AI to actually help manage the volume of customer requests, allows us to reclaim millions and millions of dollars of value in staff time. And then we're using process automation and CRM to make sure we're getting that data and making sure that what happens post that question, which is they need that service, we're fulfilling that too. So I'm going to start with a few final pieces. A lot of folks say, okay, great. We're thinking about digital transformation. You might be like, that's interesting. I get it. AI, it sounds like this big scary thing, but there are actually ways counties are already using it. They're really delivering ROI. So what should we be considering when we think about bringing AI into our organization, bringing this constituent experience platforms into our organization? So the first one I would start with is, obviously the biggest thing y'all are thinking about is, what is the cost to our taxpayers and return on investment? The second one is, how easily can we purchase it? The third one, which I think is really important, is implementation footprint and timeline, right? One of the great ironies is, yes, this will save a ton of time for staff, but do we have the time and hours today to invest in the systems to save them time in the future? So you really need a good implementation plan and team to help make that possible. And finally, you want to know there's dedicated support and innovation, right? You don't want to just buy something and be like, that's it. The world is changing very quick, as we've already seen. It's not going to be something that you just buy at a state and time and that's it, right? You want something that's going to continue to grow, adapt, improve, to handle more and more complex needs. And so, this is where we kind of focus, and happy to kind of go into details here, but we've already seen 5 to 6 figure ROIs and staff hours saved through handling that admin work. Make it easy to purchase. Our implementation process is really, really important, where we let you start with kind of this AI search and grow over time. And then we have that commitment to that dedicated support and innovation. So this is kind of the piece I would really emphasize, is like, how can you break down your projects into smaller places to start with AI and then continue to grow with it? And so we offer the AI search and chat, and I gave that example for Rowan County and Polk County. We're about to announce a few in Florida, which is really exciting. Usually folks start with the AI search and chat because it's easy. It's already set up. It takes 30 minutes to get onto your site, right? From there, though, what you built out is that general knowledge base, that question and answer system. And then we start to work into, how can we add this to the phone system? And how can we start to record and log those requests? And so it's really built to meet you wherever you're at, There's always a size of project that works for the organization, and it's something you can jump on quick because I think the world is not waiting for us on the government side to figure out how we can leverage AI, right? And so that's the kind of final note I want to leave folks with there.
Parth, can you stay on that slide?
Yeah.
Because that was the primary question that I had as you were presenting this is, all counties are a little bit different, right? So
That's right.
big counties, small counties, some, even medium-sized counties may provide a level of service that exceeds some of the larger counties. So I think what you're saying is here is it's kind of an iterative process for a local government to get their feet wet, see if you like it.
Right.
Okay, if you like it, then let's kind of build on that.
Exactly.
And which I think is great. Now, on that first part, how is it only 30 minutes to start this, and what would that look like on that piece on
Yeah.
the slide?
Yeah, so that first part is a good question. It takes us a little bit more than 30 minutes on our side, but what we're trying to make it is really easy for the counties to set up. So what we're doing is we're actually doing the pre-work for most of our counties, where we're going through the sources, usually the code and the website, ingesting all that and building the initial engine out of that. So what's neat is we've actually set it up in a way where it's just a little thing you can embed in your website, but it's ready to go from day one. So the same way you kind of folks will embed their like Facebook feeds and Twitter feeds, like you can just embed that on your site. And that piece takes 30 minutes because we've already done the, heavy lifting of ingesting that content, adding the code, training it. We've done it for more counties. So you're getting the benefits of all this data over time and learning. So it is shocking. People are surprised that it's like 30 minutes. I'm like, yeah, it is truly easy to set up. And then as you start to see activity on that, you're collecting all this information, which is now going to be used for your phone and your CRM and things like that. So it really folds nicely into that.
So it begins to I'm going to use really basic analogies because that's kind of where I'm at, kind of the
Yeah.
first grade on this. So it kind of just sits and hovers on the website and provides
Right.
that kind of, it's just kind of looking for stuff and learning and getting that stuff. So it kind of begs the question, it's kind of the garbage in, garbage out. What happens when you have a community that's got a really deficient website? Are you able to go in there and say, look, our AI learning, well, not AI learning, but our assessment of what you have is not strong enough to really give you what you need. And so I don't know if y'all make recommendations or offer to help them on that side of it.
That's right. No, that is a great point. We actually have a great partner we work with who does kind of this website. They call it website kind of content reviews, which I think is a really important piece, which is putting in plain language, all that kind of clarity. I think that happens. I'd say the other case that's even more common is also pages are out of date, right? And this was an example I kind of gave. So we work with this organization in Wisconsin, and they hadn't updated their law enforcement page in 2 years. And so when they use this AI search tool, they start asking, who's the police chief or all these questions, and they realize it's an old one, right? And then they click through the links and realize that their pages hadn't been updated in a while. And so that was a really interesting use case for us, which is in that pre-setup phase. Sometimes the website's great and they're able to launch in those 30 minutes. In other cases, they actually use the tool to figure out which pages are out of date because it's actually a much more natural interface. Like I'm used to what questions am I getting on the phone? Let me just type them in. And if the answer is oh, that's seems like old information, let me click through those links. That's how you can easily find out which pages are out of date, right? Whereas right now with the keyword search, it's just giving you a bunch of links. Very few times are we clicking through those and being like, yeah, is our page on animal services up to date, or is our police chief information up to date? Probably not, right? So that's also something that we'll do, which is sometimes folks will start actually using it on their communications department side as a tool to figure out for our top, let's say 40 questions we're receiving, are those pages up to date? And this is a really easy way to test that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, but for your work and partnership with that community, they probably didn't even realize how out of date their website is because everyone's got to have one, but not everybody, maintains it and what have you. Partly got a question. It's probably come from an attorney, but it says, how is public records requirements in Florida impacting use of AI? And I don't know how familiar you are with some of the public records laws in Florida, but they're
Yep.
pretty strong.
No, they're very robust. And so it's one of the really neat things on our side, which is if you're using, so I'll start broadly and then I'll start about what specifically we do to make that possible, given, we do work with Florida already. So we've seen this quite a few times, but at a high level, it makes it really tricky to use tools like ChatGPT and others because there is this question of, those are public records then, right? Um, and I think that's why we always recommend whether you're using Copilot or ChatGPT or something like that, try to use one of the enterprise models because what you don't want to do is you don't want those models to be using that data you're putting in for training, right? So I would say that at minimum. Robert, to your question, we actually have this all the queries and things like that, they're anonymous, but we log them in the system. So you have a full log and you can easily download them and export them for public records purposes. So it's built to be seamless one click for exporting that. I think that is something we invest a lot of time in making sure because we're about to announce a few really exciting AI searches in Florida, but that's a requirement, right? I think you need to make sure you have that log. It's great for your audit trail too, because you can make sure are the answers quality, is it answering certain questions well, but also you need to make sure there's an easy way to pull those records out quickly.
Great answer. Thank you. Parth, you said something at the beginning, which is, I'm going to paraphrase that I think everyone's expectations for a really high level quality tech experience is what we expect. I mean, we're all spoiled because Google Maps works pretty darn good. I don't have to think about any of that stuff.
Right,
I do use Alexa all day long, and so does my wife. So
right.
um, that oh, I mean, even on e-commerce, whether it's Amazon orders, it's just seamless, boom, boom. So I think our expectations really are high. So is
Yeah.
that something that y'all are striving for? Is that kind of the standard that you are looking at to make sure anyone's expectations that's now coming to a local government where expectations might be low in terms of their interaction with the community, but they get that high experience that we're all used to?
That's right. Our kind of mission internally, and we use this quote around a bit with our team is we want folks in a few years to be saying that I wish Amazon was as easy to use as my interactions with say Sarasota County, right? Like that's the goal, right? And it's how like it's an ambitious one, but I think it's possible, right? You think about AI, and I think local government has a unique opportunity here, which is um, a lot of other industries have invested a ton of resources in like technology, all these things, um, but they don't have a simple, clear use case for AI in the same way local governments do, which is so much of it is Q&A, so much of it is basic customer service. Like it's an organization where 80% of the work is customer service, which happens to be the easiest thing to address with AI. Other organizations far more complicated, right? In the private sector, customer services is like a 10 to 15% of the company, right? So I think there is this, that's the hope and the goal is we say, we want people to look at governments and say, I wish my Domino's was as easy as, working with Hernando County, or I wish, Amazon was as easy as working with Sarasota County. Like that's the experience we really want to get to. And I think we hold ourselves to that standard. And I think our clients also end up doing so as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big challenge. There's a want and a need. I want Amazon, but I need my local government. So when am I
That's
going to
right.
want my local government? So
Exactly.
um,
Exactly.
I think just the last couple of questions I have is, was the Polk County example,
Mm-hmm.
you started talking about fence, but what you said you found was that the staff was using the what you've put there as an onboarding tool. And so
That's right.
did that really surprise you, and how happy are they with that?
No, that really surprised us, and it actually led to a whole new kind of, I wouldn't say whole new, but it led to a product line we kind of built offshoot of the AI search, which is actually an internal kind of call assist and search tool. And they've been really happy about it. We've had a few folks now who want to like bring in their intranet into it, things like that. So they're information on benefits and travel policies, all of that. It's really surprised us because when we started with the AI search and chat for the website, we were really thinking about the customer service side to residents and businesses. What we didn't think about is there's also internal facing customer service, right? And there's all that question and answer and onboarding is like that really shocked me, which was I talked to a few 311 departments and the numbers vary, I think, county to county, but like on average, what we've heard is like you got a year tenure with 3 months of training, right? I mean, you talk about I'm bringing someone on, I'm getting 75% of the value because I'm spending a quarter of the time training. And even when they're done training, the surrogate court example I gave in Passaic County, like they handle legal matters. The folks on the front desk do not have law degrees, and so the surrogate court, the surrogate even joked, which is there's a difference between a probate and administering a estate. And she's like, our front desk messes up all the time because it's complicated. It's legal stuff. She uploaded the whole bench book, which is their legal document, into the AI search, and it gets it right all the time. And so, like, that's a very interesting example, which has made onboarding a lot easier for these kind of more complex issues, which is no one's going to be an expert on the law in 3 months of getting onboarded. They're just there to kind of handle the calls and provide really good experience to the callers you're calling in. So it did surprise us. A long way of saying it. It really did surprise us, and it's been an exciting use case to see.
As communities decide to scale up, what's the complexity in terms of, let's say you want to make sure that the building department gets a part is added in, and the planning department is added in, and then public works, which may have less interaction with the public, but definitely the building department. Is there a ramp up for that? Does that take a lot of time because of the building codes and just everybody may need a different type of permit, whether it's for a fence, high rise, inspections. So is there?
Yeah, that takes a little bit longer. And I will say so in the same way we kind of automatically pull in the website, we do automatically pull in the code. And so that jumping off point is actually faster still, but I think there's a lot more nuance with a lot of the stuff building departments handle. And so there is an aspect of we allow on the internal side you to upload like FAQs and kind of guide the answer more. Like if this is a question, answer this way. If this is a question, answer this way. So it takes a little bit more time for it to learn, if that makes sense. But it's faster than I think you'd imagine. Like most people would think, oh, that's going to be like 6 months to a year. No, it's probably closer to 4 to 6 weeks, right? And once you launch the initial version, you're already capturing all that data, so it makes it even easier from there.
So can it be smart enough to say, I'm a developer, I'm going to develop a 30 unit residential subdivision, and as a part of my application, I've got, let's say, some wetlands just on the edge that may kick in something else. In other words, a wetlands permit or, something to deal with,
Right.
with fill. Is it smart enough to figure out, like, you've got you don't have a standard project here, and it'll look through other parts of the code to tell you how you need to comply?
That is a great point. I'm going to show an example here, which I like. So Grand Rapids, one of the default examples we have. And so if you ask the same question, which is, I'm opening, this one's not as complicated as that, but it's an example which is like, I'm opening a cafe to serve coffee by day and wine by night. What permits do I need? Okay, that is kind of complicated, right? Which is there's multiple components there, with the wine especially adding kind of that alcohol beverage license or something like that, right? And so it can pull from multiple ones, and you can see right here how it has all those different licenses that it pulls that you need, right? So you got your indoor event license, your business license, noise permit, even figure out if it's going to exceed the noise there, food permit, which is from the county. So it's smart enough to piece those things together. And it's really as good as the sources, right? So as you provide more content, it's only going to get stronger. But I think when you compare that to an existing search experience, I mean, it's much better, right? It's going to get at least 90% of it right, which is good. So it can handle very complicated questions. You just need the sources there for it to kind of work off of.
I mean, this is awesome. I mean, AI is not scary when I look at this. I mean, it's like extremely helpful.
Right.
All right, well, let's end on a high note. I said at the beginning that AI is here. It's getting better and smarter every day. What at Polymorphic are y'all doing to look at kind of like improve upon what you've already done?
Yeah, so the two kind of big ones we're going through is I mentioned one is supporting that same, we call that knowledge base GovGPT, right? So we build this like kind of GovGPT for a county, supporting on the different places your constituents ask questions. So we showed the search, we have a chatbot, and then there's a phone version as well. And now we're thinking about having one on text and also email, right? So one, provide for all the places they can meet you, have that Q&A system. The second thing, which is actually a very complicated and interesting one, is generally with AI, traditionally, you can give it content that's static and it'll use it and learn from it, etc. There's now ways to actually give it dynamic content. I'm going to give an example from another place we work with where there's an animal shelter there, and the animals you can adopt change, right? Because it's a live database, basically, right? Once someone gets adopted, you can no longer adopt that. So we're in the early days exploring this, but it's really exciting is how you can actually link to live data. And so it'll actually figure out in real time, if you ask, I want to adopt, a dog or whatever, like it can look into that database. And you can see the applications for that are limitless, right? Because they go beyond that simple example I've given, which is it could be for live data around parcels, right? And what can I build? It could tie into my zoning maps and things like that. So that's a big area. And the last one is tying into that CRM, right? Which is, I talk about question and answer a lot. That's great. That's half of customer service. But the other half is honestly the harder part, which is what happens next, right? And so where we're really pushing is how can we use AI to make life easier for staff to provide those services back to constituents? So much stuff right now is email based and post-it notes, need to pass files around. Can AI like help automate documents that need to be sent back? Can it automate, email notifications that need to get to constituents? Can it help, accelerate and give suggestions on like, here's the process we've traditionally used to handle, say, solid waste complaints. Maybe we want to change that process based on the data we're collecting in the system. So that gets more into the CRM and workflow side, which I know we didn't cover as much, but there's a lot of really exciting stuff we're doing there.
And I would assume just the more you work with local government clients that, you're going to find a different need and a different challenge that you guys just build upon and can share with, your next client in another community. So,
100%.
Parth, thank you for coming on. Thank you and Polymorphic for being a platinum sponsor at FAC. We enjoyed your presentation and discussion with us at our legislative conference, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
All right. Thank you.